There we go. And if you don't jump about, that'll be great. Okay, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be back here, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to try and do something that's extremely difficult for me. You've heard me speak before, and those who know me, I'm quite an animated person. It's just my nature. But the problem with being animated when this is being filmed for YouTube, I don't know whether anybody remembers a comedian called Norman Collier.
Yeah.
And he used to have this shtick where he was pretending to talk with the microphone failing, and he did that sort of thing, right? Well, I unintentionally did that last time because instead of sitting straight so the microphone could pick me up properly, every time I turned to the right and to the left, if you watch that would happen, yeah? So I've got to make sure I just sit straight. I'll do my best. It's extremely difficult for me. So we all know the big P is coming up. Pesach's coming up. Before then is Shabbos HaGadol. And I'm going to ask 4 questions, not the 4 questions. Number 1, what is Shabbos HaGadol all about? Because we'll see in a moment, it's not so straightforward. Number 2, why are we, as a custom, as an observance, getting out the Haggadah in the context of a service before Pesach, before Seder? Now, that's when you get out your Haggadah. Obviously, we can prepare so that we have a good Seder and study the Haggadah. I'm talking about actually in the context of davening, taking out the Haggadah. Why do we do that on Shabbos HaGadol? Number 3, why do we stop the bit that we read on Shabbos HaGadol at Mincha? We stop just after Dayenu, and the paragraph after Dayenu, before Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. And number 4, which hopefully will answer all the previous 3 questions, if I do this miraculous thing that not all rabbis do, where they actually stick to the subject matter and deal with everything in a timely manner. Okay, what is the overall goal of Seder night? What is the goal of Seder night? Don't mean what do we have to do on Seder night, but what's the purpose of it? What's it leading to? So let's start with number 1. Shabbos HaGadol. Why is Shabbos HaGadol Shabbos HaGadol? Because we're told, well, Shulchan Aruch says something interesting, because it says because of the great miracle that happened then. It doesn't say what the miracle is. The Ramah, that Rabbi Moshe Islis, the gloss that the Ashkenazim follow, explains that this was when, on the 10th of Nisan, we'll know, of course, the Paschal sacrifice will be offered on the 14th and eaten on the night of the 15th. But it was the 10th of Nisan that the Jewish people took, each household took their lamb, tied it to the bedpost until the 14th, and that took place on the 10th of Nisan. My question on this is, hold on a second, when we Jews remember an anniversary, it's never about the day, it's about the date, right? We will observe Yom Kippur, for instance, on the 10th of Tishrei, right? It doesn't always fall on the day that actually we were forgiven for the sin of the golden calf and Moses came down with the second tablets. Likewise, the Torah was given on Shabbos, but we don't always observe Shavuos on Shabbos. It depends whether it falls on Shabbos. So with every other observance, the observance is about the date, what happened on that date. With Shabbos HaGadol is the Shabbos before Pesach, whether it's the 10th of Nisan or not. So the determining factor is not the date of what happened. The determining factor is the Shabbos before Pesach, whether it's the 10th of Nisan or not. We have no other observance that works like that. So why is it Shabbos HaGadol, regardless of whether it's the 10th of Nisan? Okay. Question about the Haggadah. So on the Shabbos before Sukkot, there's no din that says, on the Shabbos before, make sure your Sukkah's up already, go in and do a bit of prelude in the Sukkah. No, right? But what do we do with Shabbos HaGadol? We take out the Haggadah, and we've got to study the Haggadah and read from Avadim Hayinu till after the paragraph after Dayenu, which ends with the words that the God built for us, the Holy Temple, L'chapel al kol avonoseinu, to atone for all our sins. That's where you stop. So what's going on here? So there's an incredible answer which really answers what Dayenu is teaching us. Because if you were to say to me, Rabbi Kleiman, what is the purpose of Seder night? The purpose is to tell the story of the coming out of Egypt. Would everybody agree with that? That's not the purpose. You have to do it. How can you say it's not the purpose? First of all, if that was the purpose, then why are we mentioning all sorts of things which are either pre the Exodus. Laban's in there. Terach, Abraham's father's in there. Well, that's nothing to do with the Exodus. And then the Exodus, of course, is when we came out of Egypt. Do we continue the story beyond the Exodus of Egypt? The answer is yes. We're talking about the Beis Hamikdash. In fact, if you look at the last 5 things mentioned in Diana, they're all post-Exodus. Being given the laws of Shabbos, that happened post-Exodus. That was after the parting of the Sea of Reeds. If you remember, the Jewish people went 3 days. We're told that there were 3 days without, since they'd had the experience of Hashem, and therefore they were lacking Torah. That's why, by the way, you can't have more than 3 days go by without reading Kriyas Torah, Monday, Thursday, Shabbos. Okay, and they were given some laws, which included laws of Shabbos. And then they were given the laws about, even before they get to Mount Sinai, of not gathering them on. Do you remember? They already learned that you're not allowed to carry and go from the private domain to the public domain. And that's in before, but it's after they come out of Egypt. So being given Shabbos, I'll say in the conventional way, I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. After we come out of Egypt, we come to Mount Sinai. After we come out of Egypt, we're given the Torah. After we come out of Egypt, we go to the land of Israel. After the land of Egypt, and the temple is long after we've come out of the land of Egypt. So if you were to say to me, as long as you've spoken about the coming out of Egypt, no, the Haggadah goes much further than that. Therefore, there must be a wider purpose to. Oh, I'm doing it again. There must be a wider purpose to Seder night than only talking about the coming out of Egypt. Of course, we have to talk about the coming out of Egypt. You shall tell your children. But the sages, in formulating the Haggadah, don't want you to stop there, as I've just proven. So what's going on? So let's go back to Shabbos Haggadah. Why is it so important that it was Shabbos? So there's this wonderful song by Mordechai ben David, just one Shabbos and we'll all be free. This is based on a teaching that if the Jewish people collectively observe 2 Shabbatot fully, Mashiach will come. It says just one Shabbos, though. That means there's already been a Shabbos where everybody observed that Shabbos. Do you know what that Shabbos was? Shabbos Haggadah. Excuse me. Rabbi, how can it be Shabbos Haggadah? We've not even come out of Egypt yet. We've not given the laws of Shabbos yet, right? How can you say that Shabbos was the Shabbos that everybody observed Shabbos? So the answer is because that Shabbos, there was only one mitzvah that the Jewish people had to fulfill. By fulfilling that mitzvah, the mitzvah for that Shabbos was fulfilled, because that's all that particular Shabbos needed before we get all the other laws of Shabbos. And what was that mitzvah? To take the Korban Pesach. To bring it into your home, tie it to the bed, to procure your Korban Pesach. Now, you may know, sadly, we'd already lost 80% of the Jewish people in the plague of darkness because they were the ones who decided there's no slavery anymore. We've got no tsaros anymore. Let's stay in Egypt. And so what happened in the plague of darkness? Those were the people who died. That's why I'm sure you know there were 2 phases to the plague of darkness. Not just the absence of light, but the Egyptians were paralyzed. They couldn't move. Why? So they'd be unaware of all the burials taking place of all those Jews who were not going to leave Egypt. And so it wouldn't be an embarrassment to us that all these Jews were not fulfilling the destiny they should be filling. You should know only a fifth of who could have come out came. That's the whole idea of the 5th son, the one that's not even at the Seder table. Okay. But those who were left, every single household fulfilled what Hashem said. Shabbos Haggadah. That was the first Shabbos what that required. But there's a question here. When you bring a korban, there are rules about a korban. You've got to bring a korban to an appropriate place to bring a korban. That would be later the Mishkan. That would later be the temple. And you've got to have a Mizbeach, an altar. Yet we had neither. The incredible thing is, do you know what was the appropriate place? Their homes. That before we would have the designated place of the Mishkan, and later on in Jerusalem the temple, God came into Egypt, and when we say that God, not a even though it was this place of immorality, but God himself came into the homes of the Jewish people. The Jewish people were preparing for the night. People think that Pesach means God ignored the Jewish homes and killed the Egyptians. But that's not what it means. Beautiful idea. It means that on the night that God slayed the firstborns of Egypt. He didn't ignore the Jewish homes. Passing over them meant he touched them. His presence came into them as a presence of light, as a presence of protection. So think of the skipping as a kind of that light touch. You skip from one foot to the other. It's all metaphoric language. That whereas the Egyptians, their firstborns were being slain, for the Jews, God was actually with them. And what made them worthy? That they had done all of these mitzvahs relating to the Korban Pesach, and their homes became the suitable place before later on there would be the designated place where God's presence could dwell with them. Which, by the way, is one of the meanings of the word Shabbos. It's the same root as Sheves Achim Gamecha, dwelling. The whole idea of the Mishkan was, to, Lord Saxon used to say this all the time, that was a geographical place for God's presence to dwell. And of course, Shabbos is a place in time. And therefore, the whole idea of Shabbos Agadol was to show that we could make an appropriate environment for God to dwell amongst us. Now, when God gave Moses his mission at the burning bush, and he said, and everybody forgets the last part of the quote. What did Pharaoh say? Let my people go. He didn't say that. Shalach ami, what's the next word? Veya avduni, so that they may serve me. And that's what God told Moses. You know what the purpose of the Exodus was? Not simply to get out of Egypt. It's not an end in itself. The purpose of coming out of Egypt was to get the Torah, and then go to Eretz Yisrael, and then to sanctify the holiest spot in the world, where the Beis HaMikdash would be the place that God chooses for his name to dwell. And therefore, the whole of our Jewish journey is all about how can we create that environment where God dwells amongst us, as much as, at the end of the day, it's the physical world. As we say, even the heavens can't contain the Almighty. But God chose to make his presence so perceptible, as much as human beings can perceive it in this world, through that holy spot of where the Akedah took place, that holy spot of where the temple took place. And this is the point. The whole purpose of Seder is to remember the redemption that was, so that God could dwell amongst us, as a preparation for the redemption that will be. And I'll prove it to you. Because once you've told the story of the coming out of Egypt, and then we go beyond the coming out of Egypt, right? When we speak about, I said, the last 5 verses of Diana are all about post-Exodus. After speaking about Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, the broch we make on the second cup of wine is all about the future. And what do we say? I'll translate it for you. Blessed are you, Hashem, Allah, King of the universe, who redeemed us and redeemed our fathers from Egypt, brought us to this night to eat matzah and bitter herbs. Therefore, may the eternal our God bring us to future feasts and festivals in peace, and to the building of your city, Yerushalayim, so that we may partake there of your ancient offerings. You know why it's got to be an audio, visual, sensual experience, say tonight? Not only to reenact the past, but to see it as a forerunner for the ultimate redemption that hasn't yet happened, but we've got to feel with such faith as if we're now experiencing it. We've got a nod to this in Hallel when we sing Kol Rina Vishua Be'alei Tzadikim, that the voice of singing and gladness and salvation shall be heard in the tents of the righteous. Obvious question, it's the wrong way around. First we'll have the Yeshua, have the salvation, and then the celebration. The answer is that we've got to show such faith, having told the story of how God has redeemed us even before Egypt. He redeemed us when Laban was going to kill us. He redeemed us when, even though Terach was an idol worshipper, his son made good. And we became the people who started in a lowly place. The way the rabbis put it is maskil bignus. We start our story of our lowly beginnings, and we end of praising God when we become the people of God. Now, sadly, once upon a time, we had our temple, and we had Eretz Yisrael. And by the way, I'm wearing kippas rigas, so here are my religious Zionist credentials. But even religious Zionists pray for the ultimate redemption, because we want to be in the land of Israel, where they don't want to kill us from Gaza, and they don't want to kill us from Iran. and that we want to live freely in our land and serve God ultimately as we once did. This is why there's a whole machlokas over the fifth cup. People often think the Kosh Shel Eliyahu is called the Kosh Shel Eliyahu because, and I'm not saying it won't happen, please God it should, we hope he's going to come to each of our Sidorim, right? Please God, I'm all for being mystical, don't get me wrong. That's not the technical halakhic reason. There's a machlokas over that cup. Did we all come out of Egypt? Did the slavery stop for us all? Yes, that's phase one, the first cup, where God says, "We'll bring you out." Slavery stopped. We're all benefiting from that. Number two, V'hitzalti. Did God physically take us out of Egypt? Yes, he did. But when the Jews physically came out, they were still frightened of the Egyptians, which is why V'goal to the redemption, when they saw their taskmasters finally dealt with by God at the parting of the Sea of Reeds. So psychologically, they could now feel free. Step 4, V'lokachti, I shall take you to me by giving us the Torah. Have we still got the Torah? Yes. Step 5, are we all in the land of Israel with the base of Mikdash? No. But we once were. So do we have the cup or do we not have the cup? So guess what? He said machlokas. So what's the compromise? We pour it, but we don't drink it. Who's going to solve the problem? Eliyahu Hanavi, before the Messiah comes. So even that cup is about the future anticipation of redemption. Seder night, starting with Shabbos HaGadol, which was all about how can God dwell in our midst without the temple, but we look forward to the temple. We're always preparing ahead. Hence, we say that God on the Shabbos, which is all about bringing God into our homes on Seder night. In the absence of the temple, by the way, that's why even we say in Halach Ma'anya, all who are hungry, come and eat. Well, back in temple times, there would have been nobody in that position. Everybody was assigned to a carbon Pesach so that nobody was without. But sadly, in today's world, there could be people who don't even know it's Seder night. There could be people who don't have nowhere to have Seder. That's why we say it in Aramaic. Aramaic is the language of exile, reminding us before we go into how we want things to be, the reality is that we're still in exile, still don't have our Beis HaMikdash, and we are yearning for the day when we can do the Seder properly. So instead of a fliggle, for those who know what I'm talking about, a chicken being in place of your carbon Pesach, because we can't have the carbon Pesach, even those who get a shank bone, when you say Pesach, you don't point to it. You know why? Because unfortunately, we don't have the real McCoy. We've got the real bitter herbs, yes. We've got the real bread of affliction, yes. So those we can point to and have properly. That's what the goal of Seder night is. And just to conclude, because I've probably spoken a bit more over than 15 minutes, but I've got everybody. Am I right for a moment? Right, brilliant. Okay. So I want to show you something beautiful about this idea of awaiting the resumption of serving God in the temple. When you look at Dayenu, it's a beautiful thing. I often wondered, why does Dayenu immediately precede Pesach, Matzah, and Maror? And there's a beautiful answer. Because we start off with the reality of that our Seder is incomplete. We don't have the Paschal sacrifice. We say halach, and then we go into how we'd like things to be. We go into the story of redemption, and we end on a high. At the end of Diana, we end on a high that we've got the temple. God brought us to the temple to atone for our sins. So because we're on a high, and we just mentioned the temple, we'll talk about Pesach. But then we go back to the Matzah and the Maror in that order, from the high back to the Matzah, where the only full way we can observe it is the bread of affliction. Because we can't have it as an auxiliary to the Paschal sacrifice because we don't have the Paschal sacrifice and we're having the bitter herbs. But with Dayenu, it goes the other way. With Dayenu, the first 5 verses are all about Egypt. Bringing us out of Egypt, executing judgment against them, doing justice to their idols, slaying the firstborn. When we left Egypt, we were able to go to the Egyptians for some sort of compensation. Valuables we would never pay. That's all the Egypt experience. So the first 5 verses are all about Egypt. Well, then the next 5 verses are all about the journey, where God divided the sea for us, where we went through it dry shod, where he drowned our oppressors, where in the desert he fed us for 40 years. That's all about the journey. What symbolises the journey of the matzah? Because what did we eat? There wasn't time to make provisions. What was the only thing we had? The matzah. Matzah is about transition. And the final 5 are all about chosenness. That when we did the Paschal sacrifice, that was our unique way as God's chosen people of relating to our God. Just as who did God give Shabbos to? Us. Who did God meet at Mount Sinai? Us. Who did God give the Torah to? Us. Who did God give the land of Israel to? Us. And who did God give the temple to? Us. Chosenness. So we've just gone, if you like, Maror, Matzah, Pesach, going to how we'd like things to be. We talk about them, we're reminding ourselves, but we can't point to this Paschal sacrifice because actually it's a substitute. Matzah, transition back to how we are today. That each of us has got sorrows in every generation. We've got to feel as if we've just come out of Egypt, our own personal Mitzrayim. Don't need to tell you what they're going through in Israel, having to run to bomb shelters and whatever. We've got enough sorrows. That's speaking to us today. But just as God brought us out then, the ultimate redemption will include everybody. And the journey, we know we talk about Jewish history, and we talk about being returned to our temple. When was the time of ultimate joy in the temple? Sukkot. Sukkot was the time of ultimate joy. So think of Pesach will begin a journey. We come out of Egypt, and it's the time of the barley harvest. And then Shavuos, Bikurim, you could start bringing your first fruits, and the wheat harvest. But what was the ultimate ingathering of plenty? And Simcha, Sukkot. You're going to like this. I was waiting for this one to, going up to the conclusion. You'll see why I'm using that in a second. So we want to go from Pesach, the beginning of the journey. We haven't yet got to our land. We haven't yet got our freedom. We haven't yet got Eretz Yisrael. We haven't got the temple to the Sukkot. We're there. The ultimate ingathering, the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which was, they said, whoever had not been there, you'd never experienced joy in your life. We've got to go from the steps of Pesach ultimately to Sukkot. How many steps are those? 15. Why do I say 15? Because what date in the calendar is the night of Pesach? The 15th of Nisan. What night in the calendar is Sukkot? The 15th of Tishri. At the height of the celebrations, do you know what the Leviim did in the temple? Oh, he knows where I'm going. They ascended 15 steps, starting from the Ezras Noshim, from the women's courtyard, going up to the Israelite courtyard. At the height of the celebration, 15 steps. Guess how many steps there are in Dayenu? 15. Guess how many steps there are to the Seder? 15. And how is Dayenu introduced? It could just have said, Kama Tovos Lamakam Aleinu. How thank we must be for Tovos, the good things. So somebody does you a Tova. Yeah? When we want good news, we say Busaros Tovos. But there's a word stuck in there. Do you know what the word is? Ma'alot. Ma'alot. What introduces the 15 steps? Ma'alot. How many elevations God did? That's not accidental. It wants you to think of the Shea Malos, of where we're going. So let's recap Shabbos HaGadol. When the Jews took that Shepselah, yeah, it was, where is this leading to? God is giving us an opportunity to have him dwell with us in the absence of the things that are to come, where we're beginning our journey as his people, with that first act of worship collectively, that God's saying, I will dwell with you. This is how I dwell with you on Seder night. But ultimately, you'll be able to come to the place when you go on the journey, when you go on the steps, from now through to the redemption of Egypt, through to when I give you Shabbos and I meet you at Mount Sinai and I give you the Torah and we go to the land of Israel and the Beis HaMikdash. And that's why, what is the second half of the evening all about once we've done that? It's all about the future. Kel B'nai, B'nai Veischa B'karov, built the Beis HaMikdash. That's the goal of Seder night, not simply to think about the past and tell the story. Of course you've got to do that. The prism through which we tell the story is the Exodus from Egypt, but you don't stop there. It's all about exciting us and moving us to anticipate the ultimate redemption, which when I was first training to be a rabbi, every rabbinic drosha used to say, when Moshiach said, come b'mheira v'yameinu amen. I don't know whether they still finish them all like that, but that's what Seder night is supposed to inculcate on us. And please God, particularly with all the troubles in the world going on now, let us truly see a redemption that's for everybody, because the final redemption, unlike the original redemption, will be for everybody. There'll be nobody left behind. There'll be no 80% left in Egypt. There'll be no fifth son that's not even at the Seder. Will be everybody. We want everybody to have a redemption, not only for us, but for the entire world. Amen.
Yes. Well, I was wondering whether it's number 15 is because of UK.
Absolutely, that as well. I should have said that. In Hashem's name, Yud and Hey, of course. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. That was brilliant, as usual. I'll just say goodbye to those on Zoom. We'll see you in 3 weeks' time, those on Zoom. 3 weeks' time after Pesach. Right, and I think what Zoom. Right, okay, now to do the Kaddish. Rabbi Chanem, Kashem, Rasakar, Rabbi Zabzor, Kich, 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 Kich,